Well, happy Saturday, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com with your weekly news roundup for August 12th, 2023. Every week, I take a look at some headlines, news articles, and stories from across our great state. So pour yourself a cup of coffee and let's see what's going on in the news. First article I'd like to talk about is from CPR.org. That's our Course Colorado Public Radio, affiliated with NPR, the taxpayer funded pro-democratic organization up there. So, what really happens behind the closed doors at the Colorado legislature? This is from August 7th, 2023. I think there's a massive opportunity here for Colorado's liberty community and for activists and budding politicians to really talk about the lack of transparency that we've seen in the state legislature this year. If these legislators really believe in democracy and a representative government, which they claim to do, then they should be a little bit more open with the people about what they're doing behind closed doors. Let's take a look at the article here. Late on the final day of the 2023 legislative session, dozens of Democratic lawmakers suddenly left the House chamber to hold an impromptu caucus meeting. The last minute decision to gather came as chaos swirled in the building, with Republicans walking out in protest and the Democratic governor's top legislative priority failing in the Senate. As Democrats quietly gathered in a committee hearing room, staff and members of the media followed. What began as a chance to update lawmakers on the final actions of the session turned into a tense, nearly hour-long discussion that brought long simmering conflicts among lawmakers into view. In many other states, this kind of political caucus meeting would be closed to the public, but Colorado's transparency laws guarantee public access even to the most heated internal debates. Colorado's open meeting law has allowed the press and the public to watch similarly unvarnished scenes over the years, including a failed revolt against Republican leadership in 2021. But many other times, those same transparency laws have been ignored, a fact that now is the subject of two different lawsuits over how lawmakers and party leaders have allegedly strayed from the intent of the open meeting law and open records. Two Democratic representatives filed the first lawsuit alleging that both parties routinely held unannounced and closed door caucus meetings. A conservative group filed a second lawsuit calling out Democrats' recent use of an anonymous polling system to set their budget funding priorities as a group. They argue it is a semi secret planning process and that Democrats are using the secret ballot system, also known as quadratic voting, to keep their party's political debates behind closed doors. Together, the lawsuits challenge one of the legislators' open secrets. Lawmakers regularly skirt the state's open meeting laws by holding unannounced meetings behind closed doors so they can quietly plan out legislative action and iron out differences among themselves. They also use disappearing electronic messages to keep some of their communications private. So, very interesting article. This is an issue that's not going away, and a very good opportunity, as I said before, for the liberty community to really speak out, stand up, and use this as an issue to help influence the future of Colorado politics. More transparency, more openness. Who could be against that? All right, let's move on. KDVR.com, Fox 31. Denver area inflation is the highest in the country. August 10th, 2023. Well, no surprise to so many of us living in this community, seeing how expensive things are getting, whether it's housing, gas, just the price of goods in general. The Denver metro area has the nation's worst inflation problem, according to the most recent federal data. National inflation continues cooling off, according to Thursday's release from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Consumer Price Index rose 0.2% in July from the previous month and 3.2% in the last 12 months. The Denver metro area is having worse luck. Yeah, that's what it is, luck, right? With inflation than the other metro areas the Bureau tracks, according to an analysis from financial advisor WalletHub. Researchers assigned an overall inflation score to each of the 23 areas the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks based on how much inflation has risen the last 2 months in the year. The Denver Aurora Lakewood area had the nation's highest score. The local consumer price index has risen 1.3% since May, which is the second highest rate in the nation. In the last year, prices have risen 4.7%, which is the fourth highest rate. Wow. So life is getting more expensive. Of course, this comes at a time when our state legislature is trying to take away our taxpayer refunds, making it a lot more difficult for Colorado to keep the money that they earn. And of course, there's all this government spending that just distorts the economy and puts money in the wrong places. So it will be interesting to see I think the cost of living is one of the biggest issues out there, and who can provide those solutions. is a very big question. So let's go ahead and move on. Keep it rolling here. Denver Gazette, denvergazette.com, August 9th, 2023. New anti-energy plan would impoverish and kill. Wow. Pretty bold headline there. If the energy vandal in chief gets his way, more Coloradans will struggle. People will die in underdeveloped countries. The Biden administration's new draft of the government's onshore oil and gas rules reveal a destructive plan for making production on federal lands too expensive to subsist. While imposing obstacles, the plan would increase by 15-fold the cost of bonds required for oil and gas leases. The proposal also reduces the duration of federal oil and gas permits. It would eliminate renewing unused permits. Wow. Colorado could lose about 600 wells over the next 20 years. As the country's fourth largest oil and gas producer, it means a significant hit to the global market. Worse yet, Biden would end production on federal lands nationwide. In mostly upscale Colorado, the economy probably survives electrify everything and net zero 2050. Full success means 0.07% of the world's population trying to control a climate theoretically influenced by 8 billion humans. Wow, absolutely crazy. So this article continues to go on talking about, Colorado specific issues. But what's really interesting is to see Colorado losing 600 wells. I mean, those are jobs. That's an important part of our community. This whole quote unquote green agenda, this new energy agenda, is going to impoverish society by taking away our most efficient form of energy production in human history. So it's really shameful to see the politicians do this. The attacks on oil and gas need to be stopped. And it's really a life and death issue, as this article points out. All right, let's move on. Another Gazette editorial here from 15 hours ago. So that would have been just August 11th. Vote. Curbing your rights, canceling your tax cuts. Colorado's legislature can't seem to get past its contempt for the Citizens Initiative. That's the process in which voters exercise their right to do their lawmaking by petitioning proposals directly onto the ballot. And our elected lawmakers, never stop trying to undermine that right. The Citizens Initiative is voters' end run on the legislature when it won't act in their interest. The legislature resents it, especially when it comes to taxes. Rank and file voters like to cut taxes, of course, and plenty of lawmakers will do anything to stop them. Hence, an outrageous, if little noticed, assault by majority Democratic lawmakers on the Citizens Initiative back in 2021. They passed a bill deceptively labeled Voter Transparency and Ballot Measures, mandating the use of ballot verbiage intended to kill any proposed tax cut. Among its provisions, the law requires any citizens' initiative proposing to cut taxes to include at the beginning of the ballot title the wording, quote, thereby reducing state revenue, which will reduce funding for state expenditures that include but are not limited to, end quote, the three largest areas of state spending at the time of the proposal. Think schools or transportation. Spending cuts the authors of this devious law knew would get the public heartburn. So, of course, this is an issue I've talked about back in 2021, where we see these lawmakers trying to game the ballot, trying to manipulate how the ballot is presented to voters so that they can have more desirable outcomes according to what they want. So it's great to see people speaking out against this, fighting back, suing the state government to stop this deceptive manipulation of our ballots. That's one of the most important things, of course. How can people make accurate, informed decisions when they're voting if the language has been manipulated by special interests, and in particular the state legislature? So check that out for more information. Ballot information, ballot access, really ballot transparency, getting information on the ballot, I think is another winning issue for the liberty movement. Of course, the Democrats claiming to be all about democracy and trying to give everybody the right to vote. Well, hey, let's give them all the information they need to make informed decisions. Let's move on here. Rocky Mountain gun owners, all right. KOAA.com. Rocky Mountain gun owners at center of federal judge's decision to block new Colorado law. Yes, great news. I got the opportunity to talk to Taylor Rhodes, executive director of Rocky Mountain Gun Owners, last week, and kind of announced that they were filing this temporary restraining order against the state to stop them enforcing this law. Our crystal ball, it came true, said the executive director of the group. This is from August 8th, 2023. On Tuesday, Rocky Mountain gun owners are celebrating what they call a win on a hot button issue, and others saying they're disappointed with a federal judge's decision. It comes after Monday's decision by a federal judge to block enforcement of Colorado's new law to raise the minimum age to buy a firearm from 18 to 21 years old. Some exceptions to the law included 18 to 20-year-olds who are peace officers or active duty military. Rights for thee, but not for us, right? The law was supposed to go into effect Monday. Quote, "We're extremely proud about today," said Taylor Rhodes, the executive director of Rocky Mountain Gun Owners, a gun owners advocacy group fighting and lobbying for gun rights in Colorado. Quote, "We told them under the Golden Dome that this was going to be unconstitutional. And yesterday, our crystal ball, it came true." Awesome. It was also disappointment from anti gun advocates and state lawmakers who thought passing this bill would prevent gun violence. Ridiculous. Last week, RMGO filed a temporary restraining order on the law, calling it unconstitutional. The group already filed a preliminary injunction earlier this year after Governor Jared Polis signed the bill into law. Then on Monday, a federal judge agreed with the group, saying the law violated Second Amendment protections. The court agreed that the Second Amendment includes the right to acquire firearms. The court also said the bill bans an entire group of law abiding citizens from purchasing firearms based on age. So good news and good work from Rocky Mountain gun owners fighting back. It's great to see an organization defending Colorado's gun owners actually standing up and actually winning in court. I mean, it can be so demoralizing seeing everything the state legislature and governor have done to us over the last several years. But here's a little victory that we can celebrate. If you're 18 years old, you have the right to defend yourself, and that includes the right to being able to purchase a firearm. Of course it does. And these lawmakers who insisted otherwise are just being disingenuous. Let's go ahead and move on here. This I thought was interesting. I didn't know a lot of this information. I'm sure a lot of people don't either. This is the centersquare.com, how Colorado ranks in gun manufacturing from August 10th, 2023. So, of course, the United States is the global leader in firearms production. Great news there. Over 13.8 million firearms were manufactured in the U.S. in 2021 alone. Our nation's $32 billion a year arms and ammunition industry caters primarily to the domestic market. According to the industry trade group National Shooting Sports Foundation, there are over 434 million guns in circulation in the United States. And with a population of 335 million, the U.S. is the only country in the world with more civilian owned firearms than people. Heck yeah. There were over 3,200 federally licensed gun makers in the U.S. in 2021, and while these companies are spread out across 50 states, American firearm manufacturing is heavily concentrated in certain parts of the country. Here we go. According to the ATF, there were 75 active firearm manufacturing facilities in Colorado in 2021. Between them, output totaled 3,109 firearms in 2021, the 10th fewest among the 50 states. So, of course, not too surprising. Obviously, very disappointing to see that Colorado ranks so low in firearms production. It would be amazing if we had some great firearms manufacturers here, but of course, our laws kind of prohibit and prevent a lot of that, unfortunately. The state's single largest firearm manufacturing facility, as measured by annual output, is located in North Glen and run by M plus M Inc. The plant alone accounted for 55% of all the guns produced in Colorado in 2021. This article has a little chart here showing all the states and who's making firearms. Smith & Wesson in Missouri, Sig Sauer in New Hampshire, Glock and Sturm Ruger in Georgia, North Carolina, sorry, is Strum Ruger and Company, sorry, kind of cut off there. Maverick Arms, but you can continue reading this if you're interested. Very fascinating. Here's Colorado way at the bottom, unfortunately, number 41 in the list with 3,100 firearms manufactured, and of course that M&M Inc. was the biggest producer. So good to see Colorado's not the dead last, but it would be nice if we were a little bit higher on the list. But of course, it's going to take some reform of our gun laws in order to make that a real possibility. But thought that was kind of interesting. Interesting. Didn't really know much about gun manufacturing in Colorado. Let's go ahead and move on here. Now, this I know I mentioned before, but it's a huge victory. Worth talking about again. DenverPest.com, Arapahoe County will not pursue tax hike, debrucing or detabering measure in November amid rising home values. Here we go. Commissioners say there's little to no voter appetite for a tax ask. So, this is a great example of how citizen activism of outcry from the voting public has prevented tax increases in Arapahoe County. I mean, folks, you can win. This is a win here. We got some great news to celebrate. Denver Pest, August 9th, 2023. Arapahoe County will not be asking its residents to vote for a tax increase this November, nor will it ask if the county can keep money beyond what the state taxpayers' Bill of Rights permits. Of course, despite the tough fiscal climate besetting Colorado's third most populous county. Okay, come on. What about the people who are working there? What about the fiscal climate that taxpayers have to worry about? The county's commissioners on Tuesday decided not to move forward with a ballot measure, citing a recent citizen survey. There we go. So, county commissioners were doing some surveying, spending some taxpayer money, I'm sure, behind the scenes to gauge voter interest. And the says little to no voter appetite for either a sales tax or a debrucing measure, the latter of which would release Arapahoe County from the Tabor's tax limiting structures. Wow. So that is awesome. Very, very awesome. The decision also comes as voters throughout Colorado face mounting property tax bills next year, with the most recent county assessments showing substantial jumps in home values. So this is huge. Of course, this is just goes to show that voters across Colorado are rejecting a politician's attempts to take away their tax money, to take more money out of their pockets. I mean, people are working hard just to barely get by. We saw in a previous article, inflation is the highest it is in the country, and politicians are trying to take more of that tax money away. So good on Arapahoe County commissioners for recognizing that the voters would not be happy trying to take away their taxpayer money to keep that money. These greedy politicians taking money for their own special projects. Let people who work keep the money they earn. I mean, it's a simple concept, right? Let's go ahead and move on here. ColoradoSun.com, definitely a left-leaning organization here, as we saw in some previous articles, previous weekly roundups. A record amount was spent lobbying Colorado's legislature and state government this year. From August 10th, 2023, the two most lobbied bills in the legislature, a land use measure and legislation to improve hourly worker schedules, were killed by state lawmakers. So very interesting. I'm happy both of those bills got killed. So, kudos to the lobbyists, I suppose, this time for standing up for some of our free markets and our business community. Nearly $51 million, wow, was spent lobbying the Colorado legislature and state government last fiscal year, a record amount even when adjusted for inflation. That's according to a Colorado Sun analysis of lobbying data from the Colorado Secretary of State's office from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th of this year, I assume. Of course, five of the 20 most heavily lobbied bills in the legislature this year didn't pass, and another was vetoed by Democratic Governor Jared Polis. The rest, 14 measures, passed and were signed into law. Businesses dominated the list of the top 15 lobbying clients, accounting for 41% of the total spending during the 2022-2023 fiscal year. In all, more than 1,200 clients, including nonprofits and local governments, paid more than 700 lobbyists and lobbying firms to represent them. So lots of money being spent to influence our state legislatures. We talked earlier about the need for transparency, and I think this is a great example of why we need more transparency. If there's so much money flowing through our state legislature, we should probably know as taxpayers, as citizens, as voters, a little bit more where this money is going. So increasing that transparency aspect is definitely a winning issue. So you can read this article to find out a little bit more about some of these top bills. Let's just take a quick look at a few of them. Senate Bill 23213, the land use bill, very bad bill that would have allowed state control over local municipalities for zoning issues. 195 clients with 213 lobbyists, 33 against, 57 for, and it failed. So very happy to see that. House Bill 231118, Fair Workweek Employment Standards, a total anti-business bill that would have made it extremely difficult to keep employees working in Colorado. 162 clients, 203 lobbyists and lobbying firms. So glad that failed. Greenhouse gas emission reduction measures, really disappointed that that passed. Wow, look at the lobbyist disparity there. 26 lobbyists for, 7 against. Equal pay for equal work, pretty even split. The rent control, wow. Unbelievable that there were so many lobbyists for the rent control bill. Very interesting data, I think, worthy of looking a little bit deeper into. Definitely some good fodder for future articles and information. But check that out if you're interested. Of course, all these links are found at freestatecolorado.com. I'll make it easy for you there. Well, as you know, we're back to school time here in Colorado. So I thought this article was very interesting. Just came out on August 11th from the Greeley Tribune. Millions of kids, including 300,000 in Colorado, are missing weeks of school as attendance tanks across the U.S. Wow. Colorado has seventh highest percentage of chronically absent students in the country. Actually, an Associated Press article, August 11th, 2023. We'll skip the parts about some other places outside of Colorado. Really only interested in what's happening here. Here we go. During the 2021 to 2022 school year, 35.5% of Colorado's 849,000 enrolled students, more than 300,000 kids were chronically absent. Oh my gosh, wow. 35% of kids were chronically absent during 21 to 22. This was the seventh highest percentage of chronically absent students in the country. While Colorado had ranked third before the pandemic during the 2018 to 2019 school year, the state's rate of chronically absent students jumped 13% by the spring of 2022. Colorado's jump was the 17th largest of the 40 states with available data. Colorado schools together had a 15th highest enrollment drop nationally. So absolutely fascinating to see why parents are not letting their kids go to school. Maybe the kids are skipping school. Schools are losing the interest of their students. You know, with you see all the propaganda and all the indoctrination going on in these schools. I don't think it's too surprising that parents don't want their kids there, and that kids are getting sick and tired of it. So, of course, you know, the schools will say, just give us more money. Teachers unions say, just give us the schools more money and we'll solve all these problems. But it doesn't look like kids want to be there. It doesn't look like parents want their kids there. I think school choice, this is the time for school choice here in Colorado and the rest of the country. Schools have been failing. I mean, the COVID years are a perfect example of how bad their schools have been. Let's move on. A couple more articles here for you this week. KRDO.com. So where are those young kids going when they're not in school? Well, this might be one answer. I don't think obviously most of those kids are out there committing crimes, but nonetheless, an interesting kind of little tie-in here from KRDO.com from August 7th. Crimes against persons and property committed by youth in Pueblo up 28% in the last 3 years. Wow. That is a horrible statistic, right? When you have this new generation of criminals, I mean, that's a 30% jump. I mean, that's very similar to the jump we saw in kids not attending school. So, kind of an interesting trend, interesting correlation there. For much of 2023, 13 Investigates has been diving into noticeable increases in teens being arrested, violent crimes like murder and attempted murder in Pueblo. Now, the Pueblo Police Department, PPD, is releasing numbers that show the trend has been going in the wrong direction for multiple years. According to the PPD, crimes against persons and property committed by youth under the age of 18 were up 28% between 2019 and 2022. The PPD says that figure is really highlighted by a recent string of arrests of very young kids for murder, including a first-degree murder arrested of a 13-year-old kid last week. Wow. Wow. This article does mention the COVID pandemic there, and I do think that's key that the COVID policies kind of drove a wedge through our civil society, tore a fabric in our social, tore a hole in our social fabric, and kind of created a situation in which, you know, the system's fallen apart in so many levels. As we've seen the destruction of families, the destruction of church-going communities, we've seen this hole open up in society, and kids are falling in it. You know, they don't have a place to go, and unfortunately, criminals are taking advantage of that situation, and it's unbelievable to see this happening. But unfortunately, it seems to be a trend on the rise. So, what can be done to stop that is ultimately one of the big questions. A couple more articles here. Moving on. Denver7.com. Now, this was a frightening article, very interesting. Armed group behind burglaries in Cherry Hills Village connected to crimes throughout the Front Range. You got to see these photos, these little videos here. I mean, this is like five masked up, wearing hoodies, young people, it seems, with weapons, with rifles, going through the state of Colorado. Here we go. rifles and other firearms. I mean, this is a organized gang here patrolling the Front Range, looking for opportunities to steal and rob people. So August 10th, 2023. The group behind a spree of armed burglaries in Cherry Hills Village is believed to be connected to crimes throughout the Front Range, according to Cherry Hills Village Police Chief Jason Lyons. So he had a little town hall there. Lyons said multiple law enforcement agencies in the Denver metro area are working on the investigation into these crimes. And it's believed that as many as 20 different individuals are collaborating to commit the acts. Wow. The group has targeted areas from Longmont to Castle Rock, my own neighborhood included 2 nights ago, Lyons said. They are prolific. They are affecting a lot of communities, and fortunately, Cherry Hills was one of them. So homes are being targeted. And here we go. Lyons said it is uncommon for people committing property crimes to arm themselves, which is what makes this particularly spree disturbing, right? That the fact that they're going around with firearms, robbing places, seeing what they can do and what they can get away with. So is this a sign of things to come? I mean, we've seen, I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, but it's something to be aware of. It's something to see what's happening. We can't hide from this. We got to address it as a society and as individuals, to prevent this kind of thing from continuing to spiral out of control. Last article of the week is that same exact tie-in. Just wanted to leave you with this idea that Broomfield thieves tied to Cherry Hills Village burglary. So you can see them going around, sneaking around with firearms in this non-gated community, of course. And of course, why is this so important? Because this year we've seen these state legislators attempting to take away our firearms and our ability to defend ourselves. And of course, you have to bring up this 18 to 20-year-old gun ban. I'm sure none of these criminals got these guns legally. And the fact that you're going to penalize law-abiding people from protecting themselves is a frightening prospect when we have roving gangs of armed criminals in the streets of the Denver and Front Range areas. I mean, there we go, people. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time this week. As always, freestatecolorado.com, your source for articles, interviews, and more. Check out our great property tax series that I'm working on with Natalie Menton to give you some actionable information to lower your property taxes. So thank you so much and take care.